Happy Friday, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining me today. Today we'll be sharing this week's thoughts about the Cowboys' comings and goings, an update on training camp for this year, a quick view forward to the preseason game against the Seahawks, and a quick look back to the game against the Jaguars. A couple of things to talk about today are, to me, the big thing was the signing of the extension and raise for Zach Martin. Also, it was sad to see Zeke go, so I'll talk a little bit about that. And we'll get into the roster, the way it's being built, some of the standouts from the game, and how that 53-man roster could shake out. I'll also touch base a little bit on the excessive Dak Prescott hate that's been going around. And so let's go. So last week's game against the Jaguars was a loss, which uh, I still think a loss is a loss, but hey, it's preseason. Nobody got hurt too badly, that is. And so as they look forward to developing and checking out their new and old players, it was a good opportunity for some of those players to put some tape down. So to me, some of the standouts that I saw from the multiple clips that I saw on Twitter, on YouTube, and from watching the game a couple of times were some of the younger guys. For example, Damone Clark looked outstanding, looked really fast. His first full year with a training camp under his belt. Of course, last year he had that spinal fusion surgery, so he really wasn't even intended to play for the whole year. But he came in and helped the last 5 to 6 games of the season and had some outstanding plays then. But in Saturday's game against the Jaguars, he seemed to be all over the field, and that was seemingly rubbing off on some of the other young players like DeMarvion Overshown, the Agent Zero linebacker from Texas, who wears number 35 for now, but I think they're going to push him to wear that zero. And he made a really nice play on a third and short where he just stacked the line and really held his ground. So he looked really good. Later in the game, number 50, that kid Henley looked really solid as well. And along the line, early on, there was some criticism of the first round pick, Mozzie Smith, that it looked like he was getting off the ball kind of late. The kid's a rookie. He was in a system at Michigan where he was a read and react guy. He wasn't asked to press the box. He wasn't asked to create pressure into the quarterback, but rather kind of just tie up two guys and let other guys make the tackle. But you can see in some of the plays that his power is exceptional. This kid is really strong. He's a really big dude, and I think he's a really strong addition to the team. Neville Gallimore, who seems to be on the bubble, has a good pedigree from Oklahoma. Maybe a guy who, unless things really change, will be on the bubble to make the team, as the same as Big Bohanna, who also had a nice game uh, against the Jaguars. Now, what I didn't like a whole bunch was there wasn't a lot of pressure off of the edge, and the Jaguars' third string quarterback was able to move around and make some throws there at the end that ended up beating the Cowboys. But I expected a little bit more from Sam Williams. I think maybe some of that carried over into training camp this week, and he had a pretty good scuffle with the offensive lineman Hoffman, and then he got his clock cleaned by Tyler Biadasz, who just came and sat him on his ass, and which created a big old squabble on the field. You can really tell there's a offense versus defense mentality, which is pretty cool. To see some fight, some passion in these guys, but it's also kind of dumb because guys with helmets getting punched, they don't get hurt. The only thing you hurt are these things, and yeah, we don't need Micah or any of the other players hurting their hands. So that on that side of the defense looked really really solid. Juanye Thomas had a nice pick against the first team of the Jaguars. He picked off Trevor Lawrence, and I didn't see or hear the sky is falling because Trevor Lawrence threw a preseason interception during a game, not practice. I'm talking about practice here, not the game, but practice. Right? You Allen Iverson fans know what I'm talking about. So he looked really solid, and the Cowboys defense, I think in general, is going to be a really stout group. Now switching over to the other side of the ball, the offensive line early on looked rugged. They were getting pushed around. Some of the guys that were running the ball initially, especially Malik Davis, did not have a lot of success doing that. Rico Dowdle had a really nice play Unfortunately, he fumbled close to the end zone, which cost the Cowboys points. And I think in the long run cost them the game. And fumbles like that, where you have the ball away from your body, shows a little lack of discipline, lack of concentration. So I'm sure that's something that he's going to work on because he looked good. The guy looked good. He's a free agent. I think it's his third or possibly even his fourth year out of South Carolina. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy. And Malik Davis didn't get a lot of run. Unfortunately, there wasn't many holes for him to run through. Now, I think a guy that a lot of people are excited about is Deuce Vaughn. If you haven't seen or heard of Deuce, of course, he's a 5'5" guy, but this guy looks like a player. And he made one cut where he ended up getting three, maybe 4 yards. But when he hit that hole and cut sideways, he moved laterally. And I'm not getting ahead of myself. I'm not saying he is Barry Sanders, but it was a very Barry Sanders-esque type of move where he cut and spin and didn't lose yardage. He also had a couple of other touches. The guy catches the ball. He made a nice catch that was thrown a little high to him. He went up and got it. And of course, he scored his first touchdown in an NFL game. Granted, it's a preseason game. So he looked pretty solid. Cooper Rush came in, went, I think, 12 for 18, looked sharp, looked calm as usual. I think that guy looks like he's half asleep sometimes, but he's on his game. Jalen Tolbert looked really good. There was a questionable offensive PI call against him where they said he pushed off, but he made a really nice grab where he kept his toes in down the field and was really, really moving the ball. Guy looked a little shaky to me was Cavante Turpin. I think maybe he's in one of those situations where he may have read his press clippings a little too much, and he's coming off a Pro Bowl season as a kick returner, but he coughed it up on a punt rather. He fumbled on a punt, which isn't good. He dropped the pass. He was out of position on another pass. But the guy's quick. The guy can be explosive, and I think he can also be a weapon that the Cowboys can utilize during the game. Other than that, we had Will Greer, who played the majority of the game. I think he's going to play the majority of the game against the Seahawks. He didn't look that great in stretches, but then he got kind of hot. Made a couple of connections with the young guys, and really seemed to move the ball down the field a little better. So that was a recap of the game. Keeping an eye on the kicker position and see how that goes. And moving on to training camp, they seem to have two really spirited practices on Tuesday and on Wednesday. That they were their last padded practices before the Seattle game and before they concluded training camp in Oxnard. So there was a lot of action, a lot of activity, some good hitting, some tempers that were lost. But there was one particular catch that Jalen Tolbert made where he stopped on a dime after he caught a ball where he looks really good. And so I think maybe Michael Gallup needs to have a really good year if he wants to keep his spot. And of course, Jalen Tolbert, you can say he's all Oxnard, as they say, right? He's on the all Oxnard team, which means right now in training camp he looks fine. But what happens when the lights go on, right? That's when it really counts. So we'll see how he does against Seattle. Seattle does seem like they're going to play their starters for at least one or two series, so we'll see how that goes against them. Seattle is a really good young team. They've had a couple of excellent drafts, and we'll see if Geno Smith can continue his climb after last year's comeback player of the year and Pro Bowl season that he had, where he got a nice paycheck out of that, which he, I think, well deserved. So I remember watching him during his draft and watching him slide. It was uncomfortable watching the poor guy. He stuck around, drafted on the second day by the Jets, but he's bounced around, and now he had a really decent and good season with the Seahawks, and we'll see how well they do this season. They're in a tough division with the 49ers, and we'll see how the Rams do if they bounce back. The Cardinals are still the Cardinals. We'll see how they do without Kyler Murray, and when he returns, we'll see how they go. But the other big news, of course, was the signing of Zach Martin, and the guy held out long enough. His fine stacked up more than $500,000. But he ended up getting a nice raise, an average, I think, of $18 million per year, up from 13. And he was happy. During his interview, he said he really wanted to be in Dallas, but he thought he needed to take a stand at this particular time. And when they asked him, what about the money you lost? He said, well, I ended up making more money than I lost. So he was pretty happy. And I think he does an absolutely good job of solidifying that line. makes Terrence Steele better, makes Tyler Biadasz better. They're on opposite sides of him, either side of him rather, and I think he just makes them better by being one of the best guards in the game now and possibly ever. Considering that the Cowboys had Larry Allen, who's regarded as one of the top three guards in NFL history, that's saying a lot about Zach Martin. So I'm glad he signed. Um, One thing that I was a little sad about because I've always been a Zeke Elliott fan. I thought he brought a lot to the Cowboys. I think he got a lot of criticism for his contract. Um, I always think it's kind of funny when people complain about other people's money, right? And they talk about the Cowboys salary cap like if they're actually going out of their pocket to pay it. And I get it. We buy the gear, we buy the memorabilia, people buy tickets and all that. So indirectly they pay, but it's not your money out of your pocket. I don't understand why people care who makes what and why they complain so much about the contract. I think the guy wasn't healthy. I think he played hurt when he shouldn't have, and in the long run, I think it hurt him in his career with the Cowboys. But now he's with New England, and New England does a lot of movement with their backs. But I hope he has a good season, except on the fourth week when they do play the Cowboys, in which case I hope he doesn't have a good game that day. But uh, I was sad to see him go, but happy that he landed on his feet. So good for Zeke Elliott. Good luck to him in New England. The other thing that I want to touch on was all of the hatred that's been spewed at Dak Prescott. I know I'm not a Dak defender guy. I'm just as disappointed in his performance in the two playoff games against the 49ers. I mean, I was thrilled with his game against Tampa last year where he really seemed to come out of that shadow, but then he had a couple of bad throws against the 49ers. You can talk about they were bad routes, they were bad this, but that's that last threshold that he needs to cross to be considered elite, I think, and become a great quarterback. Because he's got to win a big game, even a couple of big games. He's got to win them. But I think that the hatred that the guy gets is just unfair. The guy won the uh, Walter Payton Man of the Year award. So off the field, obviously, the guy does good things. On the field, he's a good leader. There was a lot of mess going around about some junk talk to him by Trayvon Diggs during a practice where he told him to shut his ass up, stuff like that. You do that. You do that to all your teammates, even your best player, your most important player. You talk crap to him. I mean, I know I have. I've gotten a top talk to me. I was top shelf shit talker. If you want to ask my friends, I absolutely do and did at least when I played, but any sports. But it's part of the game. And then to hear other pundits just really rail on him like he's a horrible quarterback. One guy asked, "How many teams would right now trade their guy for Dak?" And he said, "Maybe two." Okay, I think there are a few more than that, but why don't they talk about other quarterbacks? I just don't understand. I mean, in terms of winning and in terms of interceptions, he was right there with Josh Allen from the Bills last year. But he gets a lot of credit and a lot less criticism. I just think it isn't fair. Let the season play out and then go from there. So let's support the guy because if you're a Cowboy fan, that is, and I understand if you hate the Cowboys and you want to hate everybody on that team, but there are teams that I don't like, and I don't spend my time hating them or talking about their players unless it's that week, and or maybe in the division. Sure, I'll give you that, but I think credit where credit's due. A kid like Jalen Hurts is quality quality guy, seems to be a class act all around. Has fought back from losing his job at Alabama, transferring to Oklahoma, being a second round guy. They expected it for him to sit behind Wentz. He worked his way up. Number one guy, had a great season last year. Unprecedented in yardage and touchdown runs combined with his passes. So hats off to the guy. I just hope he doesn't beat the Cowboys. That's it. But I'm not going to talk junk about him, because he got paid and he made some. He's going to make a bunch of money now. Or some of the other players on the Eagles, I think they had a great damn draft. They've got two monsters in the middle from Georgia, Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter. These kids are going to be terrorists for the next damn 10 years. It's spooky. The Cowboys passed on Nolan Smith and took Mozzie Smith instead. But Nolan Smith is reminiscent of Micah Parsons. It was a great draft. Last year they drafted Nakobe Dean. They have Kylie Ringo or Kaylee, I don't know how he pronounces it, another cornerback from from Georgia. They have that kid Eli Ricks from Alabama. The kid that picked up um, another lineman from Alabama, Steen, who was I think they did a great job of helping build their offensive line. The Eagles are tough, but whatever. You guys do whatever you need to do, right? I'll keep backing the Cowboys. So that's where we are. And now looking at the roster, talking about the roster, switching to that, there are going to be some tough cuts. The offensive line, of course, you've got your starters. You've got Tyron at left tackle. Hopefully he stays healthy as long as he can. Tyler Smith at left tackle. Tyler Biadasz at center. Zach Martin at right guard, and Terrence Steele at right tackle. For depth, you may have Awesome Richards, Matt Woletsko. Um, you have some of the younger guys like Bass, and you have Hoffman now on the line, and the guard kid, I can't remember his name right now, but um, they have some depth, but it's not proven depth, and it's to be seen. So that makes these preseason games super important to see what kind of film they put on Matt Farniok. I think he's going to be their swing guard because he can also play center. Um, and the kid Idoga that they signed off the Jets from the Jets, unfortunately he's hurt. I think he's going to be their swing tackle. But Awesome Richards looks good. Yeah, he's a young guy. Hopefully he can develop. It's a long season. Guys are going to get hurt. They're going to need their depth. So right there, it comes down to, do they keep 10? Do they keep 11 linemen? It all depends on how some of these kids play. If you look at the tight end room, you've got Ferguson locked in. He looks like the number one guy. He looks like tight end one. Then you've got Schoonmaker, who unfortunately has been injured, has had plantar fasciitis. You've got Peyton Hendershot, who I think he's going to get pushed by that kid John Stevens, who had a really nice game against the Jaguars. He's a converted receiver, but he's long enough to be a tight end. He just needs to be a good blocker. But then again, Hendershot's not a great blocker. So there's going to be some competition there. And Sean McCown, who's also been a steady blocking tight end for the Cowboys for the past few years. All Big Ten guys, except for Stevens, even though he did transfer from Minnesota. So technically, he's a Big Ten guy too. So that's a tight end room. As far as the receivers go, you've got CD, Brandon Cooks, Michael Gallup, Jalen Tolbert, Cavante Turpin, and then it comes down to, do they keep Simi Fehoko? Do they keep Jalen Brooks, who's shown a lot in his special teams as a gunner? Do you keep that kid Houston, who started against the Bucks in the opening game last year? So some of those kids are going to end up down on the squad, and I think Simi may be a guy who's on the bubble, but he's a big guy. He's fast. I think he's got a good pedigree. He just needs to catch all the damn balls that are thrown his way, and he needs to have a good game against Seattle. From there, you go to your running backs, and of course, you've got Tony Pollard, uh, and you have the question about who's going to be running back two. There's a lot of buzz about Deuce Vaughn being the number two back. I don't know if he can be a number two back. I think he may be too small. And not that he's not a great player, but I don't know if his body can take the pounding. And so then I think right now Donald's got the lead to be running back two, and maybe they're a combination too of Deuce and Rico Dowdle. And so I think the guy's going to be on the outside is Malik Davis and possibly Hunter Lepke, unless they decide to keep him as an H back / fullback. The guy shows some promise. He can get some tough yards. And of course, at quarterback, you're going to go with Dak and Cooper Rush, and they'll have Will Greer on the practice squad. Is where he'll end up. So that's on your offense. Then moving to the defense, I think the defensive line is where they're super stacked. You go to the ends. It all depends on where you count Micah. Do you count him as an end? Do you count him as a linebacker? So you've got Micah and Tank. You've got Sam Williams and Dorrance Armstrong. There are your edges, and Dante Fowler. So there's 5. Then you have Mozzie, Hankins, and that's 7. And then you've got Golston. That's 8. And then do you keep Gallimore? That's 9. And then what do you do with the other Fehoko, Junior Fehoko, who's not related to Simi? What do you do with that guy? I mean, do you keep 10 of them? Chances are, yeah, because you want to keep those guys fresh. the way Dan Quinn runs that defense, it's, they're running around with their hair on fire. It's 48 minutes of hell. They're coming at you, and Micah has looked unstoppable in practice. Hopefully, he can carry that forward and stay healthy and not play as nicked up as he did last year. You go to your linebackers. Again, do you count Micah there? You've got Micah, Van Der Esch, Damone Clark. What do you do with Jabril Cox? You've got DeMarvin Overshown, and you've got number 50, Henley, a solid special teams guy who also made some nice plays. And then where you're really deep is in your secondary. You've got Trayvon Diggs, you've got Stephon Gilmore. They're your starters. You've got Bland, who's your nickel. Then you have Jordan Lewis, who's still on the pup list. You have Nashawn Wright. You've got Kelvin Joseph. You have the rookie Eric Scott. Then you go into your safeties, where you have your three-headed monster of Javon Curse, Malik Hooker, and Donovan Wilson. Then you have Israel Mukwamu. You also have Juanye Thomas. You've got Tyler Coyle. You've got some depth back there. And the thing is that Dan Quinn uses these guys in a hybrid linebacker safety role that I think works really well for him. So they're guys that have position flexibility. So they're going to be guys that you want on the field, because not only can they play two positions on the field, they can also play special teams for you. So you have that, and you have your three guys that are your snapper, your punter, and your kicker. Who's going to be the kicker? Ryan looks like Brandon Aubrey, but he needs to kick and needs to be accurate. And if not, look for them to maybe sign a veteran right before the start of the season. Either Ryan Suckup, Mason Crosby, Robbie Gold still out there, or some other alternative of that. But that's what the team looks like as of now. The preseason games, I'm really glad that they're letting them keep the 90-man roster until the last cut. That, I think, helps their bodies stay a little more healthy. You will not see starters in the game on Saturday. I've read on Twitter and heard on YouTube on many, many of the pages and podcasts that I follow that the Cowboys are going to bubble wrap 24 to 25 guys who aren't going to see the field. You'll see Mozzie out there. I think he needs the snaps because he's a rookie. But other than that, I don't think you'll see many starters outside of Damone Clark, and I don't know how much run he'll get. But nonetheless, it's a good idea to keep it on some of those other kids. Isaiah Land on defense had some nice pass rush last week. That's another guy to keep an eye on. So that's a recap on this week. I look forward to seeing this Saturday's game. It will not be on next week on Friday, possibly during the week. I'll have a podcast then because I'll be out of pocket for a couple of weeks on a trip with my wife. So thank you all for watching. Please like and subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on Twitter. I'm The Poncho on Twitter. And also my other podcast, Thoughts from the Midlife, which is more of a man conversation, topics, suggestions, shared experiences to help some of our younger guys develop their skills. So thank you again. Again, I appreciate you watching. Have a great weekend.